Hello, this is Sandy Fritz. Excuse me. We are progressing through fundamentals of therapeutic massage, and we are beginning to look at chapter 4. So just as a reminder, these YouTube videos are set up to support your self-study, some guidance through how you read through the chapter. They are put together just like if I were teaching you in the classroom. We'll kind of relax through this chapter about terminology, because there's a lot of language in a chapter about terminology. Not just medical terminology, but cultural terminology, terminology related to massage therapy, terminology related to well-being. So let's get started. And we go through all of my share screen things that I do. You would think I would be able to sort this out. There we go, I did it. Chapter 4, this is the last chapter of Unit 1 in Fundamentals of Therapeutic Massage. So this chapter is going to talk about a lot of different terminology, but the goal is for it to result in you understanding how to manage documentation or professional record keeping. So I'm going to move myself up here a little bit. Let's increase the font so that I can see it. And do remember, there is a Read to You feature. And that's helpful as a study aid. It's right down here on this bar. So when we think about terminology, we're thinking about how we communicate, whether we communicate verbally, whether it's body language or written, and with electronics now, there are expanded types of communication, such as what we've got right now with the ability to chat virtually. When I do these videos, I just pretend like there's a class out there, and I want that to come across. I could communicate differently. I could be very, very organized, and I am, but I could, have a chapter, I could have an outline and a PowerPoint and all of that. Or I could choose not to even have you see my face, which I sometimes think about. But we have to figure out what is going to be most engaging and what's going to be most accurate when we communicate. And communication is extremely important and the foundation of the 3 previous chapters. And a lot of the difficulty we find that we engage in has to do with miscommunication. So it's worth taking time to have the language to be as clear as we can. And that actually happens to be one of the problems in massage therapy, is that we don't have an agreed upon language. We have the ability to have it in place through what's called the EntryLevel Analysis project, but it has not yet been universally adopted. This textbook is based on that language. But you'll also see an overlap sometimes of classical terminology related to Swedish massage, or better known as classical massage, which is only part, it's only a piece of the massage therapy skill set. It's a form or a style as opposed to the overarching idea of massage therapy. So always what we do is we start with the chapter outline and a review that each of these are kind of in 15-minute study segments. However, this is language heavy, and so what you're going to have to do is do more memorization in this chapter. It's not a, it has concepts, but it's a lot more about how you would learn to use these words, both to speak them or to understand them if you find them written. So we're going to talk about massage therapy terminology, which is based on that ELAP, or Entry-Level Analysis project. And if you listen carefully, you're going to hear my chirp and tweet in the background. Then we're going to look at quality of life terminology, which is actually out of the World Health Organization. And I'm going to show you how this can be a platform for developing outcome goals. So really helpful. And then the whole idea of being respectful, taking the time to learn how to speak in a way that is supportive to a variety of cultures, ages, gender fluidity, people first terminology. If somebody has a limitation of some sort, mobility or visual. I have a visual issue, and so that affects my mobility. It's not, if I didn't tell you, you wouldn't know it. So we do want to explore that and how we navigate that. This is kind of an ever-changing area. Medical terminology, which is pretty standard, and I strongly suggest that you use the resources here in the book to go outside of the textbook and learn medical terminology. It's the foundation of a lot of our scientific language. And it's important that you're able to break words down in order to be able to understand them. And then we're going to do a brief overview of some anatomy and physiology. Now, your main textbook for this is Mosby's Essential Science for Therapeutic Massage. But it's nice to have in this fundamentals book, it's nice to have a quick reference to some of the common language that's used. So then you want to read through all of your chapter objectives. And these are all going to base around accurate communication and what it takes to be able to do that. Again, here's your list of key terms. This list here does not get into the specifics of medical terminology. These are more terms related to the concepts of this chapter. Certainly in a chapter on terminology, you're going to have lots of terms, many more than just this. So as I previously mentioned, massage therapy struggles, massage therapy as an occupation, the community struggles with an agreed upon language. And this is something that continues to interfere with things like research, cross-discipline communication, and even our how massage therapists talk to each other. There are terms that are used incorrectly. There are terms that nobody really understands what they mean. There's terms that's come out of an attempt for a differentiation, for maybe to support a continuing education or an outcome. Each of the cultural systems has its own language, and massage therapy, as you remember in chapter 1, is rich, has a rich cultural history. And we had brought a lot of that terminology in, but we've lost the essence of that terminology when we try to speak it. And we forget that a chair is a chair is a chair is a chair, even though it may be called, the word might be very different in different cultures and different languages. So, my goodness, I got a little bit of a frog in my throat here. There have been attempts to define this over the years, and massage therapy body of knowledge was one of those, and it would be worth trying to take a look at that. It's quite dated now, and unfortunately this great document did not make its way into general usage. That's, again, it's also unfortunately a theme in massage therapy. So the newest rendition of this, and there have been many, taxonomy is another word that's often used. The most current, which is now kind of dated, is the Entry-Level Analysis project. And it also has not necessarily worked its way throughout all educational and communication platforms in massage therapy. However, most of the major textbooks now use ELAP as the foundation for their communication description about massage therapy. So we're going to briefly look at that. It is used here throughout the textbook, and should there be a level of confusion over another form or style, that language is also brought in. For example, gliding, which is the ELAP term, within the form of Swedish massage, that might be called effleurage. So you often find people using multiple terms for that. And when I learned 35 or more years ago, that was still the main construct of the language, even though massage therapy as a discipline has evolved beyond the Swedish form. It's a form of manual therapy that is very rich and has incorporated many forms and styles, and then has evolved into its own uniqueness. So we have to be patient as language changes. You may still find the classical Swedish terms used in some definitions, and you're going to have an internal translator on that. So I'm not going to read this to you. I'm going to point this out so that when you read the text, you will start to get a picture of what happened when the Entry-Level Analysis project was put together. It's quite a comprehensive document. You can log on to the website where it's at. It starts with an analysis of massage therapy at entry level, and then expands further on all the way to comprehensive suggestions for lesson plan development. The intent was to create a language that was generic enough and reflective enough of what was happening, using more not engineering, but more common terms related around what we do. And what we do is apply a mechanical force into the tissues, and then that stimulates shifts and changes in a variety of different ways. And so the foundation of this was to try to capture that, and so that we had a common language that could be used to describe any form or style. that currently exists in massage therapy and or might emerge. Gosh, I hope not. That's all we need is one more form or style. So things like anatomical tools. So, you know, I'm not thrilled personally with that term, but what it means is what part of our body do we use to apply the mechanical force? What is a force? Simply, it's a push or pull, which you can break down all forms of manual therapy and inclusive of massage therapy into intelligent pushing and pulling. And then it goes on to talk about friction, which is another term that you find used not just in something like this, but also in engineering. I mean, this is one of the things that they have to take into account when they build bridges, for example. What is pressure? And then I'm going to flip through some pictures here that talks about direction and gets into some of these ideas of the applications. And as each of these are described, then it'll take it into a key concept and the modification of that. So this is something that you'll want to read, and you'll want to play with this. Get some Play-Doh or silly putty or frozen or bread dough or something, and see if you can practice some of these concepts as you are also reading through this, so that you've got a better understanding kinesthetically of what's going on with this. This stuff actually goes back to Newton's laws of motion. And so that's kind of fun to read that a little bit. So here are, so what we do when we apply this mechanical force is we load the tissue. And so these are some examples of that and how we load it. Is it one type of force or is it more combined? And typically we use more combined loading. So again, play with the pictures, take a look, read the terminology, get an idea of what that means, actually do it kinesthetically with one of those types of materials that responds to mechanical force in a way that you can see it. So with a force, when you apply it, right here we're getting into something called soft tissue deformation. So when you apply a mechanical force to an object, and during massage, the object is our client, when we do that, two things can occur. First, if the object can move, it will move. So think of kicking a ball. And that's the intent, to move the ball when you kick it. Typically, that is not our intent with massage. We don't want it to move away from the force. Sometimes, maybe some joint movement or something like that, but mostly what we want to do is change the shape of the tissue. Because when we do that, as well as when we move, when there is movement, the listening stations, the sensory receptors in the skin and in the muscles and in the ligaments and in the tendons and the joint capsule, all of those listening stations, they respond to that change in shape. And then we start communication. So what we typically want with massage is we want the tissue that we're targeting to change shape. And so that will be expanded as we go into the actual application of massage methods. So these are the approaches that can change the shape. And if you look at these pictures, you will see that my anatomical tool, I think that's me in this picture, my anatomical tool applied to the object, this client's foot, held stable so it can't move, is going to change the shape of that tissue, and you can see that right here. And here are more examples of that. And each of these methods has its own name. So a twisting, that's kneading, and more. So the friction, the idea of going back and forth, elongation, making something longer, oscillation, vibration, a pounding move, and even gentle holding is going to, at the very least, change the shape of the surface tissues of the skin, which starts that communication process. And we've mentioned active and passive movement. And in addition to that, we can augment that with some thermal therapy, hot and cold, and or we can actually use water or external tools to apply a mechanical force as well. So this little box describes the physiology of how tissue can deform. Usually the deformation is not permanent. The intent of the deformation is to stimulate sensory receptors and then to develop a communication loop. But sometimes, like when you sprain an ankle or overstretch, you can get more of a permanent change. So a lot of this right here provides the foundation for some of the methods that specifically target connective tissue, which is primarily the tissue that is changing shape, and are some of the underpinning theories to connective tissue approaches, sometimes called myofascial release or whatever. In addition to that, within the ELAP, we have concepts about how we apply. What is our intention? How fast or slow? How do we work at that, what's called a therapeutic edge? At that point that will trigger a shift if one is desired, but not be so aggressive that the person tightens up against it. Working with the grain and across the grain of the more cord-like structures of the skeletal muscle. Here is a way of being with your client. So this terminology isn't perfect, but it's the best we've got right now. And while you're going through your studies, also remember that overlap primarily with Swedish/classical terminology. You're going to have to kind of talk both ways until we agree upon a language. This focus on professionalism talks about how it's not just us that struggle with language. And so this is deserving of a read. And there's a link here to the actual paper. All right. So the next category of communication is quality of life terminology. And since massage is, especially at entry level, most is suited. It is suited for health, well-being, and supporting quality of life, regardless of what a person's health status is or medical status. If we understand what it means to have quality of life, as determined by the World Health Organization, then we can start to look at goals. So somebody still may have, let's say they have had an amputation and they use a prosthesis. How can their quality of life remain satisfying even with this physical situation? So the quality of life is not directly related, although it is part of what is a person's physical status. A lot of this has to do with more of a psychosocial concept of where is a person within their humanness, and how are they resilient and adapting to the challenges of life. So these are all the different types of well-being, and you're going to hear well-being talked about more and more. One of the reasons why, if somebody wants to pursue all the way through a doctorate, I suggest public health, because public health is looking at populations and they're very aware of this quality of life, and they are looking to mitigate / control issues that would interfere with quality of life, such as the coronavirus that we're dealing with right now, as well as how do we improve the environment, how do we improve diet, how do we do all of that stuff, including measures like massage therapy and yoga is quite popular right now. How do we do that to affect these categories of well-being? When a client, I'm going to read this sentence to you. When a client tells a massage therapist they want to feel better, this is a common thing. They just want to feel better. Lots of times we'll use the term feel better, move better, sleep better. So how does all of this come into the idea of feel better? So all of these factors influence that idea of feel better. And there's some places that massage can interface directly, and other areas in here, it's much more abstract. It's amazing how much the quality of life will improve if sleep improves, for example. And massage can support restorative sleep. So this is where we're at. This is why this language structure is so important. So they should be coming, this is from the US, they should be coming up with the new one on healthy people over a 10-year period. But here's typically all of the stuff that's involved. And we certainly can interface in areas around this. But there are designated and credentialed health professionals in all of these areas. So this also becomes a very much a interdisciplinary approach. So the overarching goals: attain higher quality, longer lives free of preventable disease, achieve health equality or equity, and that's been shown to be an issue during the pandemic, and promote quality of life through all of the life stages, and the population tends to be aging. So take time to absorb this. There's a little less memorization here, a little more concept and awareness. So this box here has all of the various domains. And each of these domains can have the ability to guide an outcome for massage therapy. And our evidence-informed outcomes are relaxation, well-being, quality of life. Then we have stress management. And these next three tend to become targets when quality of life begins to diminish. So we have stress, stress management, pain management, mobility limitations, and functional mobility. But we can, just like the chapters, each chapter in the textbook covers an overarching area, the sub-chapters in through here, we can create a sub-goal underneath that informs the treatment plan. How are we going to uniquely work with this client to help them achieve this goal? We can't do it for them, but we can assist, we can help. So this one right here, level of independence. Quite common as a person moves more into maturity, they might start to get some joint aches and pains. Something like climbing stairs might be difficult. Now, that can limit a person's ability to reach places in their house, for example. If climbing stairs is uncomfortable, maybe they can't get downstairs to the laundry or upstairs to a bedroom. And while we can't necessarily reverse directly with massage therapy and a joint deterioration, we can support mobility around that limitation, and maybe enough so a person can get up and down the stairs. So these can also then become what's called a qualifiable and or quantifiable goal. So if our goal is functional mobility and we're measuring that by ability to climb stairs, then we can develop a quantity, a measurable goal. The client will be able to climb 5 stairs, or we can have a qualifiable goal, which has to do with what is being observed or done, or what somebody wants to do. So that would sound more like being able to get up and down stairs to be able to provide, complete the laundry tasks. So sometimes this is categorized as activities of daily living. So I talk about the idea of functional mobility that is targeted specifically to activities of daily living. It is not performance mobility necessarily. So an athlete or a dancer, they're going beyond activities of daily living. They are wanting their body to go do more, or do something unique, or do something repetitive. Now, we all have performance activity. One of the reasons why I've a little gravelly in my voice is I have been really working to complete these YouTube clips in preparation for the class starting in the fall of 2020. Well, we plan on having in class, the class being face-to-face. We want to be prepared to move remote, as well as making good decisions about time and travel to the classroom, and information that can be presented electronically like this. So, if information can be presented as efficiently and maybe even more efficiently through an electronic medium, then we should do that and save the actual in-class time for developing skills and understanding where that is not as effective. So you're gonna have to spend your own time going through each of these domains and come back to these often. I have used this box with clients and said, okay, let's go through this. Which of these areas do you feel like you're doing well? Because you want to start with identifying what's going right. And which area do you feel that you would have a better quality of life if this was easier for you or improved? And if it comes up with something where I am concerned about here, if somebody might be moving into a mental status where they need additional help, then this can identify my need to refer. Or if somebody says to me, I want to work on developing performance for my golf game. Massage therapy is best at a functional mobility. So that can help, but they might need to take some golf lessons. They might need to reach out to another professional. So that's what quality of life is about. Very important, very important. So I gave some other examples during this talk, but here is another example of how you can use that and use this as a model, working in pairs, doing some role playing or with a family member, and see if you can do this same kind of critical thinking processing using the quality of life terminology. So this will be the last terminology area that we will address in this particular video. This is very fluid right now. We as a society are trying to figure out how to do this. And because we don't know how to do it really well, the language seems to be changing all the time. I know myself, I stumble over, is this the right term now? Has that changed? And if we are transparent, if we engage in open conversation, and we start out with the idea, I want to communicate respectfully. People will help you as you navigate through this. I worked with professional football teams. Now I work with basketball teams. But those environments are very multicultural. They're very rich. And I don't know all those cultures. So I don't know what terminology is most appropriate. And I'll just say that. I'll say to a basketball player that it originates, their home country was the Sudan, but they immigrated to France at a young age, and their main language is French, and they are a little less comfortable with English, and they're very young still. They may not understand the nuances of what I'm saying to them, and so I have to communicate that to them. If you don't understand what I'm saying, please ask again. I have to choose my words a little bit more carefully so that I am picking ones that they have a strong sense of being able to interpret appropriately. I have to pay attention to some body language so that I can tell when I have said something that is confusing or uncomfortable. I had the privilege of working with a basketball player that was from Eastern Europe. And it amazed me. He spoke 4 languages, including English, but all of those languages would sometimes show up. And so I asked him one time how he learned English, and he said he learned it by watching cartoons. And I would pick up some of that language base that you would find in some of the cartoons he watched. So we don't know. We haven't lived in that area. We want to be open to learn. So be open to say, I don't know, but I want to know. And that's the foundation in this section here. So we are a global society, and every culture has a way that it has created a way of being, and we want to learn how to respect that. The idea of gender fluidity, not necessarily just male or female. What is the continuum of that? Our terminology around our relationships. The family unit is very different now than it was 50 years ago. The population is aging, and the gray-haired mature adults, they don't know what they should be called. It's kind of fun. There's kind of a little bit of disgruntledness around the idea of elderly, but the term elder conveys respect. So there you go. Again, you just have to ask, which pronoun do you want? He, she, they, or something else? Do you want me to call you Mr., Miss, Ms., and your last name, or first name, or a combination of that? I went into a lot of homes with the professional athletes in this rich cultural community, and their children were instructed to call me Miss Sandy. And I remember stumbling at one time and saying, Sandy's fine. And, you know, it was, no. Adults needed to be treated with respect. And Miss Sandy is what we want our children to call you. And so I had to let go of some of my discomfort around that because it was different, and realize what level of respect was being conveyed on me or for me. And then people first terminology falls into this as well. The Americans with Disabilities Act brought this important population segment to our attention years ago. The description of what that is, what a disability is, has expanded. And we stumble over what to say. And so, just like with the culture, when you're working with somebody and you don't know what language to use, what words to use, ask. Just ask. Many times people will disclose ahead of time, like, I have dyslexia. And when I was coming up, they kind of didn't know what that was. I was diagnosed as an adult. And so I have dyslexic type behaviors, and everybody does dyslexia a little different. But if you don't know that that's how my little brain works, then some of my behaviors are going to be confusing. So like, when it's time to take a break in class, I can't figure out on the clock what time they're supposed to come back and what a 15 minutes would end up being. I can tell time, obviously, but I have a hard time translating that. And so I typically will designate somebody in the class to be the timekeeper, because who knows what I'm going to tell them. So just a little example. There are guidelines, however, that are listed here. And pay attention, these can change because we're still trying to figure this out. But do spend time going through this. And if at all possible, remember, just like I do dyslexia in my own unique way, somebody who has a visual issue has their own unique way of doing that, or a mobility issue. So how a person has adapted, responded, thrived around all of this. Somebody else with the same within a similar situation may do it different. But that is a preface of saying, talk to as many people like that have this as part of their life, and understand how they have adapted and thrived, and where they struggle, and where massage might help with that. Here are some additional terms that you're going to want to become competent with and explore more. I was in a relationship with somebody that lost their vision to retinitis pigmentosa. And I had the opportunity to live that in my personal life, watching the changes related to vision, and also live with a guide dog, a leader dog, and all of the different understandings and concepts that go along with that. But one of the things I realized is that this individual, because of the way to hold the harness, they had a tendency towards some shoulder issues. And it's amazing how strong you have to be to hold that harness with the dog. And I thought, that might be something that I need to take a look at as somebody uses leader dog. So this section is going to end with a mentoring tip and some language that you can use that augments what I have suggested here for you. So this is where we're going to cut this video for part 1 of chapter 4 in Fundamentals of Therapeutic Massage. And the next one will start with medical terminology, which is a little more concrete. You know what's going to happen is by the time I get done doing all these, I'm going to know how to do it. All right, so here we go. I'm going to end it, and